Our next speaker is Cheryl Buss, who is currently the CEO of ABSA International, which includes ABSA Securities UK. Among other responsibilities, Cheryl leads the bank's international operations, which ultimately enables a globally scalable business that drives connectivity with corporates and institutional clients through an independent international presence. Cheryl's got a passion for African business and the people that are involved in making this a success. Cheryl.
Thank you, Rupert. Esteemed guests, colleagues, valued clients and friends, welcome to the start of what I believe promises to be a really good 2 days. Seeing everyone here today, I think, is indeed amazing, because I think it's one of the first live events that we're seeing. But I think what is also great is that we acknowledge the fact that so many people are hopefully also logging in digitally, and just really gives us pause for just to think about the progress that's been made in the digital environment over the past couple of years. ABSA Group is delighted to be able to be here today, to be able to attend the event, not only physically, but also virtually. And we welcome the opportunity to meet with a number of you, virtually or indeed face-to-face. I think I'm going to set out today just to give a little bit of an overview, following on from what the Minister has said, just to provide a bit of context in terms of the opportunities and some of the sectors that we see developing across Africa and the opportunities that are offered across the, one would argue, really interdependent ecosystems. I think, however, we also have to highlight the challenges that do exist, because I believe it would be naive to think that it's all easy and that recovery will be simple and will happen in a short period of time. So on that, the world and Africa has seen a seismic shift during the past 20 months due to the impact of the pandemic. The financial integrity of all the economies has been shaken as we grappled with the short and long-term effects of the pandemic. And many of us have pivoted our strategies in a quest to not only survive, but perhaps now to start looking forward in terms of what the options are such that we may thrive. The national lockdown implemented across most of the African countries has had a dramatic impact on the economies. And as we see a significant impact on GDP, that has contracted significantly during 2020. Specifically, Southern Africa experienced a decline circa 7%. Central Africa was about 2.7%. And so now the priority really has to be focused on economic growth, recovery, and to try to get the momentum going such that the continent can develop exponentially. I stand here today and I really believe that there are significant opportunities across Africa for investment and growth. However, Africa does have to recover and rebuild. Recovery will be gradual, but it should also be inclusive. And we should expect this to take a number of years. The pandemic has exposed structural weaknesses across Africa. And we should view this as an opportunity to look at the reforms that we might look to implement to ensure that growth is indeed inclusive, sustainable, and exponential. African states have surely realized the importance of developing independence, as they haven't been able to rely on the global environment as much as perhaps they've been able to in the past. The importance of regional strength, the coalition and alliances that we've seen have really played a significant role in saving lives and will play a significant role in building. Saving lives through access to vaccines, health programs, and the funding thereof, and building as we look forward to rebuild lives of people, communities, and ecosystems. I think that the African states at large have, however, demonstrated sound crisis management through this period. And this regional cooperation has really come to the fore and presents itself as a real strong future opportunity looking forward. If structural reform is indeed effected, positive transformational shifts can only serve to contribute to the development of the African opportunity. These need to include reconsideration of fiscal positions, bringing public debt down to levels that are more sustainable, transparent governance to ensure that those looking to invest in the continent actually get to understand the transparency around the governance, ensuring that their returns are secured. Mobilizing domestic revenues. This is key when you look at the fact that Africa is so reliant on imports and its exports. Intra-Africa trade will really become a highlight. Leveraging infrastructural development to support key sector growth and placing Africa on a sustainable and a positive trajectory. One of the key milestones implemented this year was that of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The free trade area is really being seen as one of those golden highways to unlocking the continent's untapped economic power and shaping its path to prosperity. There are some hurdles to overcome, and we shouldn't for 1 minute be under any illusion that the size of such a task is going to be easy. As we know, even when we looked at when Europe started to implement its own free trade area, this took a good decade to really start to realize some of the benefits. During a period when the economies have been hard hit, the Continental Free Trade Agreement really does hold economic promise. It not only has the ability to stimulate the recovery, but it has the ability to reshape the continent and for the continent to look at intra-trade and globalization at large. The World Bank expects that over 68 million people are going to be lifted out of moderate poverty due to this free trade agreement. Alongside the free trade agreement, what is key is the reassessment of supply chains. As we know, global supply chains have been brought under question through the pandemic, and as such, I think many global corporates and institutions alike are looking at how they maybe reshore and nearshore their operations. And I think that the execution of the free trade agreement will certainly go a long way in terms of enabling this such that intra-Africa trade can be leveraged. That being said, any free trade area will only be successful when it has the ability to rely and be dependent on consistent infrastructural development. And this remains one of the key challenges in truly unlocking Africa's growth opportunity. As the Minister said, although Africa is one of the fastest growing regions in the world, it does have an infrastructural gap of circa over $100 billion per annum. And it is estimated that the spend over the next 10 years should exceed over $1 trillion. The challenge, however, is where does the spend for this come from? We know that many of the sovereigns are looking at levels of leveraged GDP at the moment. And we know that the only real way that we're going to see success is through public and private partnerships. We need the help of the private sector to bridge this infrastructural gap, to realize the potential of the development, not only in this infrastructure itself, but also to really realize the opportunities and the benefits that can come from the free trade agreement. So, although infrastructural development is arguably still slow in parts, we are starting to see some significant progress. And we're starting to see projects that are adding to the network of road, rail, port, and other notable infrastructural development nodes. This is critical because the more infrastructural projects that are completed more confidence will be generated amongst the investor environment, and perhaps more funding will be raised to close this gap. The current reality and the challenges, however, are stark. According to the World Bank, Africa has a population of 1.3 billion people with a combined GDP estimated at about $3.4 trillion. Yet, despite the abundant resources, the continent only contributes 3% to world trade, whilst intra-Africa trade is at 20%. Economic growth, development, and and success are intrinsically linked to sustained infrastructure development, which equals positive return for investors. As dependent on infrastructural development is to the success of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, so is the integration of the supply chains and the sectors which support trade. Moving on, really, the next question is, which sectors do we see that offer growth and opportunity? Well, there actually are a number, and I'm just going to cover off a few today, but I think what is really key is that they are interdependent amongst each other. Infrastructure, energy, trade and logistics, they offer opportunity for investment, but are needed amongst themselves to be able to fire up sustainable growth and development. There have been green shoots that have signaled that Africa is still an attractive and promising investment destination with the right patience. We've seen that the energy and natural resources sector continues to grow and flourish at an exponential rate due to Africa's rich reserves. This sector is truly poised for investment growth and opportunity. Africa traditionally, however, has lacked reliable and affordable energy. But we're seeing increased access to power, especially with the material LNG projects that we're seeing kicking off, as well as greater investments in wind and solar energy, leading to hybrid energy solutions for Africa. And with increased investment in gas, that means that gas can be supplied on a more competitive basis into these markets. And as we know, natural gas plays a significant role in augmenting solar and wind power, which are dependent on conducive weather conditions. The African continent has a renewable energy potential, varying in type across geographic areas. The resources considered include hydropower, solar power, wind energy, geothermal energy, and of course, biomass. Given Africa's current access to energy capability, probably only covers about 50% of Africa. Development of power solutions incapable, as well as linking these in with accompanying technology, green or hybrid, is a key success factor for the growth of the continent. And investment opportunities do truly exist, but to be considered in collaboration with the public sector. And noting, of course, that investors are expecting a significant financial return on projects, but it's not only financial anymore, but they also need to meet increasing ESG targets as well. One of the key hallmarks of the pandemic has really been the accelerated growth of digital platforms, necessitated by the demand for contactless and a touchless environment. I think going forward, enhanced customer experience is going to be absolutely critical. And the choice of bank customers, as an example, will be purely based on maximum convenience, the ability for customers to bank where they want and how they want. Bringing this home to Absa, our investment over the past few years has certainly been allocated to technological upgrades. Front-end solutions and organization-wide automation, as well as digitization, not only internally to enhance our operational effectiveness, but also to ensure that the front end for the client is enabled as digitally as possible. Moving on into another digital platform, and I think that one that's exciting and surely offers significant uplift for Africa. We're seeing the agricultural industry turn increasingly to digital infrastructure to power and secure its e-commerce, and we found this to increase market efficiency along agricultural value chains. It improves farmers' incomes, livelihoods, it creates new jobs and business opportunities within farming and within the wider ecosystem and the communities in which they operate. In Rwanda, as an example, during the pandemic, government recommended e-commerce platforms to the public during lockdown, and this included fresh food from farms. So digital agriculture value chains have greater transparency, enabling more traditional farmers to be able to leverage the accessibility of digital and to ensure that the product is indeed traded. An example of leveraging technology and fintech is one where we have a collaboration with Avenues GT, and I think it's a great example of how different partnerships can really promote the uplift of communities across Africa. This is a digital infrastructure platform that allows for the exchange of documents and information governing the flow of goods and capital making payments. It has the ability to provide financing to farmers on a digital basis, and it has the ability to operate under a more inclusive ecosystem, thus driving that which we need: digitization, infrastructural development, and accessibility to the opportunities that the Continental Free Trade Agreement does offer. The last sector I want to touch on is the healthcare industry. We know that this was one of the most impacted by the pandemic. And the impact of the pandemic really created a paradigm shift that really changed the typical structure of health systems and accelerated the need for innovation and digitization. And I think that the next 18 to 24 months will really see the industry come under a considerable amount of scrutiny, with certain trends already being visible on the continent, such as telemedicine, which has emerged as an alternative to fill the gap of inadequate health resources and infrastructure in Africa. The current pandemic has revealed that more than 400 million people have little or no access to health and the infrastructure that supports the wider health ecosystem. One of the large impacts that the pandemics had on the continent within the health sector is the severe shortage and supply of basic medicines. And this was really highlighted when the global worlds, China, India, upon whom Africa really relies for the supply of medicines, went into a lockdown. In order to reduce dependency and face growing medicine demand, African companies and countries have had to increase foundations and scale up to really consider their own R&D, their own manufacturing hub, and their own ability to access logistics such that medical supplies can be distributed literally to the last mile. I think that the pandemic has exposed the fragility of the health systems, but therein lies significant opportunity as we look at other ways that we can ramp up not only supply and supply chains within the health sector, but also basic infrastructural development. Although I've highlighted the realization for Africa to be less dependent on the world, the global supply chains, and that the opportunity truly does exist for structural reform mechanisms, which will assist in developing trade opportunities, developing much needed infrastructure with a lens of environmental sustainability, in developing opportunities for a number of sectors which are codependent on one another for growth. We can't, however, ignore the impact of global policy and sentiment towards Africa. The policy towards Africa often influences and shapes investment, choices, and decisions. The recent Brexit announcement, as an example, opens up new opportunities for the African continent, and the UK has had to forge partnerships and alliances, thereby bringing opportunity not only for UK trade and for UK companies looking to invest into Africa, but also for African companies themselves. The new Biden administration in the US has made it clear that partnering with Africa is key priority for them, and to promote trade and to foster growth, again, not only for the benefit of the African community, but also for the benefit of those American institutions and corporations looking to invest into Africa. We know that China is now Sub-Saharan Africa's most visible and biggest trading partner. a role that has positioned it to shape its policy across the continent, with Chinese companies recently supporting a number of economic trade zones in a few of the hubs across Africa. As we consider global policy and how Africa works with the world to stimulate its development and progress, yet enhance development to enable less reliance and further economic independence, we will see the secondary impact of COVID in African, and this will play out in African sovereign credit rating downgrades, as the countries really do start to feel the impacts of declining fiscal revenues and foreign exchange receipts. Most African countries' fiscal policy is already severely restricted, with high levels of debt and significant structural budget deficits. While the wealthier economies have the luxury of historically low borrowing costs, unfortunately, developing nations will find this extremely difficult and expensive to create the fiscal space necessary to really leverage the opportunities. Key to this development success will be, as I've mentioned, public and private partnerships, coupled with funding mechanisms from public sector, from investors, from commercial banks, and importantly, from development financial institutions who are playing an increasingly diverse role on the continent. In concluding, what is certain is that Africa is the focal point for investment and opportunities, given the right patience and given the right appetite. Africa does have to continue to focus on saving lives and rebuilding after the shock waves of COVID settle. And this also has to be done in a fiscally challenging environment for governments. However, with some structural reform, with the necessary development in infrastructure and the opportunities that lie therein, enabling growth across the myriad of sectors with an interdependent ecosystem, the continent does hold an untapped amount of opportunity for investors through collaboration and partnership, ensuring growth and prosperity for all. Thank you.